Welcome to Treadmill Talks with Shannon Maves, a podcast for athletes and fitness enthusiasts to pass the time during mind-numbing cardio while I use my no-bullshit coaching style to educate, inspire, and entertain. I'm your host, Shannon Maves. Now let's walk and talk. Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Treadmill Talks, the one about injuries. I'm sure that some of you listening right now are already aware of this, but I also know that a lot of you are unaware of the fact that one of my areas of expertise is injury rehabilitation. Even though I do primarily consider myself a physique coach, I also work with a lot of people who are overcoming injuries as well. I actually have a background working alongside a physical therapist. I was the trainer that her patients would go to after they had been discharged from therapy. And I would also assist her with the physical therapy when needed as well. Nowadays, I'm working at a chiropractic and rehabilitation clinic where I train patients who have herniated, slipped, or bulged discs, whiplash, and plenty of other issues with their spine and other joints. It's actually something that I'm extremely passionate about because as an athlete myself, you better believe that I have had to overcome my share of injuries over the years. And as a coach for other athletes, I have had to train a lot of clients through injuries as well. So I figured it was time to do an episode on training and rehabilitating injuries. This is kind of a broad topic, though, because obviously there are about a million different types of injuries, and enough of them do need to be treated differently than others. Which reminds me that I should probably pop in my little disclaimer and state that I am not a licensed medical professional. Absolutely nothing in this episode is intended to diagnose or treat any condition. And simply listening to Treadmill Talks does not constitute a client-coach relationship. Regardless, at the risk of sounding boastful, I know my shit when it comes to training around injuries. But again, I cannot diagnose your injury. A physician has to do that. But once I know your diagnosis, I'm pretty fucking confident that I can help. If it's some type of crazy rare injury that I've never dealt with, I will be humble enough to admit that. But 99% of the time, people experience similar injuries. Shoulder pain, knee pain, hip pain, low back pain, neck pain. They're generally all caused by some type of imbalance going on. The imbalance may have been created through some type of repetitive motion or from a traumatic event. But usually they can be managed and sometimes even treated by correcting those imbalances through proper stretching and strengthening. For example, shin splints are a result of a repetitive movement like running. When we run, our ankles are constantly extending, meaning that we are using our calf muscle to point our toes over and over and over again. This repetitive use of our calf muscles causes them to become really strong, but also really tight. And our calves' opposing muscle, the anterior tibialis, which is the muscle on the front of your lower leg next to your shin bone, is constantly being stretched during this repetitive motion, thereby weakening it. And tight calves and a weak anterior tibialis are a perfect recipe for shin splints. But in order to treat shin splints, we don't want to stop movement altogether because movement is medicine. Sure, you may need to stop running or doing whatever activity caused the injury, but only until you've corrected the imbalance. What I would recommend doing for something like shin splints is stretching the calves since they have become chronically tight and strengthening the anterior tibialis since it has become weak by comparison to the calves. You can do this by performing some physical therapy type exercises with resistance band, or my favorite is just walk on your heels once in a while. By walking on your heels, you are working to strengthen the anterior tibialis while also stretching the calves. You can also try walking backwards. It's the same idea. Now, that's just one example of an injury. I'm sorry to say that I'm not going to go into that much detail about every single injury ever. But my point is that oftentimes an injury can be a matter of imbalances that need to be corrected. But okay, what about when an injury causes joint pain? How can an injured joint be treated by correcting an imbalance? Well, there's something called the joint by joint approach that is so fucking fascinating to me. I nerded out so hard researching it when I first learned about this because all of a sudden everything just made so much fucking sense to me. Now, the joint by joint approach is this concept that each joint in our body has a primary function of either stabilization or mobilization. And each joint alternates its function as you move up the body. So your feet need to be stable, your ankles need to be mobile, your knees need to be stable, your hips need to be mobile, your low back needs to be stable, the middle of your back needs to be mobile, your upper back needs to be stable. And then this is where it kind of branches out because after your upper back, both your shoulders and your neck need to be mobile. But then as we move down the arms, your elbows need to be stable and your wrists need to be mobile. So, okay, how do we apply this concept to rehabilitating an injured joint? Well, when we have pain, we tend to look only at the site of the pain. We think, well, if my low back hurts, then there must be something wrong with my low back. My shoulder hurts, so something must be wrong with my shoulder. But oftentimes, what we should be doing is looking at the areas around the pain. Oftentimes, low back pain can be caused by limited mobility of the hips, as well as weak muscles surrounding the lower back, like your abs and your glutes. Shoulder pain can be caused by a weak upper back and tight chest muscles, and so on and so on. Obviously, there are some circumstances where if something traumatic happened, maybe immediate rest is necessary, but I'm not an EMT or anything. So I'm not talking about like when the injury actually happens or the immediate care that needs to be taken. I'm talking about like afterwards a little bit because movement is medicine. And keeping a joint completely immobilized for too long is only going to cause the muscles around it to weaken and possibly tighten depending on how it is immobilized, which is why I recommend incorporating light movement as soon as you are able to tolerate it. I'm not saying you should go and start running or powerlifting again, but some light physical therapy type exercises that help to get blood flowing to the area are going to be more conducive to recovery than complete rest and immobilization. If you can get some type of actual physical therapy done, that's always going to be the best practice. But not everyone has access to a physical therapist because of insurance or other reasons. And let's be honest, a lot of us get injured and don't even go to the doctor, let alone a physical therapist. But the important thing to remember when you are training around an injury is that you want to train around the injury. You want to train around the pain. You do not want to train through the pain. The thought that if it hurts, that means it's working is not true. But it's also important to realize that there is a difference between pain and discomfort. When you're training around an injury, you want to stop if you experience pain. But if you feel some discomfort, like, oh, hey, I haven't worked that muscle in a while, or I haven't moved my body in that way before, that is different. But any type of sharp shooting pain is not what you're going for when you're trying to rehabilitate an injury. I promise there are always alternative ways to stretch and strengthen different muscles. And it is important to ease into them. Do not try to push too hard too quickly. As someone who personally suffered from horrible low back pain due to a bulged disc, I promise you it is not worth it. My impatient, dumb ass just wanted to deadlift again, and I made an injury that probably would have been completely healed after about a year, take almost 3 years to heal. Go lighter than you think you should. Wait to see how you feel the day or two afterwards, and then incrementally increase how hard you push. Another important thing that I want to discuss about injuries is that relieving pain and treating an injury are not the same thing. Pain relievers can help to reduce pain, which may help you to stretch and strengthen more than you could if you didn't take them. But that also might mean pushing too hard too quickly. So you've got to be careful with that too. Ice can help to reduce inflammation, which can relieve pain momentarily, but some amount of inflammation is necessary for recovery. The guy who came up with the whole rice method actually recanted his position on it because research started to show more and more evidence that rest and ice are not conducive to recovery. Oh, and in case you haven't heard of RICE, it's an acronym for rest, ice, compression, and elevation, which used to be standard protocol for treating an injury until we started to learn more and realize that movement and heat are better for recovery. That is with acute injuries. I'm not talking about like broken bones and stuff. If you have a broken leg, you don't want to walk on it. And if you have excruciating pain due to way too much inflammation, then using ice to reduce some of that inflammation might be for the best. But ice can be a bad thing, whereas heat is never a bad idea. Ice not only reduces inflammation, but it also causes muscles to become tight. So if you were to use ice before trying to stretch or strengthen your muscles, it could actually increase the chance of further injuries. Heat, on the other hand, helps to bring blood to the area. Blood flow is not only necessary for recovery, but it can also help you to get a deeper stretch and reduce the chance of injury when resistance training. So if you're ever in doubt, go with heat. Rarely do I suggest ice to any of my clients or patients who are rehabbing an injury. And if you're going to take some type of pain reliever, just be cautious of the anti inflammatory ones because your body needs inflammation to heal itself. Now, doctors are probably going to tell you to take whatever the fuck because their job is to diagnose and treat whatever is going on right now. They want to make you feel better right now. A doctor's job is not to dig deeper and find the root cause of your pain. And that's not meant to be a jab at doctors. Doctors are great, but I think we tend to place them on too high of a pedestal sometimes. If you need a diagnosis, go see a doctor. If you need immediate relief, go see a doctor. But if you want help really figuring out the root of your problems, go to a chiropractor, go to a massage therapist, go to a physical therapist. Those are the types of people that can help you figure out what is causing your issues. Any type of surgeon is going to try to push surgery because that is how they get paid. But if you are able to fix your issue without surgery, wouldn't you prefer that route? I sure as hell would. And I have. My doctor in high school told me that I should never run sprints again because of how bad my shin splints were when I was running track. But I implemented all of the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. And guess the fuck what? I can still run pretty fucking quickly too. I do have to remain vigilant about my stretches and exercises, or my shin splints will come back. But the reason a doctor says shit like you should never run again is because he is protecting his ass from liability. Because he's either under the assumption that I'm not going to take the proper precautions, or because he might not know the proper precautions, because that's not his area of expertise. His job is to diagnose. So he told me that I had really bad shin splints. But a physical therapist can help you learn what to do to heal the injury and teach you what to do moving forward to prevent it from happening again. Now, the last thing I want to mention is something that does not get discussed nearly enough when it comes to treating injuries: nutrition. What you eat will play a role in how quickly you recover from an injury. Certain supplements can also help to speed up the recovery process. I'm not going to get too deep into the nitty-gritty with this, but I'll give a few examples. First of all, protein is what your body uses to build and repair lean tissue, which a lot of us already know if we're trying to build muscle or improve body composition. But protein builds and repairs all lean tissue, not just muscle. It builds and repairs connective tissue, joints, bones, and all lean tissue. And supplements like glutamine have been clinically proven to increase the recovery time of burn victims. And anecdotally, I've seen glutamine increase the recovery time of some of my clients who have had to work around injuries as well. So when I say that I'm an expert in injury rehabilitation, I'm not just talking about the training aspect of it, but nutrition as well. I can't diagnose what's wrong with you, but I sure as hell can help you once you get a diagnosis. And you better believe that all of my clients are trained in a way that is going to prevent injuries and imbalances from occurring, regardless of what their goals are. Yes, even my bikini competitors train chest and get physical therapy type exercises in their warm-ups because their health and well-being is always my top priority, not just the aesthetic muscles that the judges are looking at. But anyway, I hope this episode was informative and taught you something new. If you have any more specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Since this was a pretty vague and general episode, I'd be happy to help you dig deeper into whatever is going on with your own situation, being mindful of the fact that I cannot diagnose anything. And if you want an even more tailored approach to really develop a training and nutrition plan that will help you train through an injury, I've put a link in the show notes to apply to work with me. And I always appreciate when you guys share these episodes because I promise you there are always other people out there who could benefit from hearing this stuff. And when you take just a second to share, it really helps me get a lot more reach. Regardless, though, thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for listening to Treadmill Talks. If this episode taught you something, lit a fire under your ass, or at least helped you forget how long you've been walking in place, please leave a review or take a screenshot to share on your social media. Don't forget to tag me at Shannon Maves so I can give you some love right back. And thanks again for listening to my Treadmill Talk.